I came across this comment on the evilautism subreddit today that really got me thinking. It says, "So I wish that people would stop romanticizing autism spectrum disorder. If you are articulate enough to make a video about it, then you probably don't have it. Or at least your case is so mild that you have no business talking about it." This kind of comment is not only hurtful, but reflects a deep misunderstanding about what autism actually is. Let's break it down. Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late diagnosed autistic adult, and today we're going to address the belief that in some areas of society and online, that there is only one way to be autistic, as if by the waving of some magic neurotypical wand, you're instantly undiagnosed and the sum of your experience and knowledge reduced to nothing. Maybe even mocked by someone who doesn't even know you. On this channel, we support people who are exploring their identity and considering whether they might be autistic or not. There are a good mix of people in the Scratching Post Discord, and looking to the wider community in general is welcoming to those who are self-identified or just curious and wanting to learn more. Over 1,000 of you responded to my recent community poll asking if you were autistic. The majority of you was self-identified. Less than half my audience is formally diagnosed. So I feel it's extra important to make this video today, talking about both gatekeeping and ableism. Gatekeeping who is autistic enough to talk about autism is a form of ableism. It dismisses the diverse experiences within the autistic community and perpetuates harmful stereotypes. Look, as an example, Donald Triplett, the first person ever diagnosed with autism, earned a degree and worked as a banker. His degree was in a foreign language. He was perfectly articulate, and if he was given to making YouTube content, presumably could have done so. I do the opposite of gatekeeping. You will be forced to like my interests, says this domineering cat, and you will listen. This ginger cat is doing an autism, especially with this level of intense eye contact, asserting kitty dominance like this. This is how I find many autistic people to be, sharing of their interests and knowledge, not gatekeeping it. The idea that being articulate or able to create content, meaning that you therefore can't be autistic, is not just wrong, it's harmful. It overlooks the spectrum nature of autism and the challenges, but also our often so-called spiky skill profile. For me, my classic software engineering background and a niche skill set has meant that I've been in demand for work. I'm former Microsoft, NHS and defence. I've built and designed systems for hospitals and GP surgeries, but I have downsides that I've gone into elsewhere on my channel. Downsides that the diagnostic criteria refers to as deficits. Some other autistic individuals are non-speaking, whilst others, like me, can articulate my thoughts or our thoughts clearly. This doesn't invalidate anyone's experience because it's a spectrum condition. Meanwhile, there are autistic people with high support needs, or level 3 support needs, living in supported accommodation, needing 24-hour round-the-clock staff support. Some of them do make YouTube videos about their passions, or so-called special interests. The barrier to making content online means that anyone who has a smartphone can make and upload videos to YouTube. I know of at least one person with level 3 support needs who makes Minecraft gaming content and has published hundreds of videos on his channel to more than 1,000 subscribers. Now, at the risk of doing myself out of a job, from a technical standpoint, posting opinions online is not that difficult. Saying that autistic people can't create video content is plainly wrong. Autistic people can do difficult things. Elon Musk is on the spectrum, and he's repeatedly innovated across several different industries, similarly to how autists do in STEM fields. Our tendency to hyper-focus, particularly on our passions, so-called special interests, means that it's possible to learn something to an unusually high level. If only we had some control over choosing our special interests. I believe there's a strong case that autistic brains are a natural human variance, to be seen as, to borrow a phrase from Chloe Hayden, different, not less. Ableism is discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities. It can be explicit, like the comment we just saw, or implicit, baked into societal norms and institutions. In our society, there's an implicit expectation that everyone should conform to what's considered normal or typical, that air quotes there for those that are just listening in. When we deviate from these norms, we can face stigma, marginalization, or outright discrimination. In the paper Avoiding Ableist Language, Suggestions for Autism Researchers from 2021, the authors state that in the past, autism research has been mostly conducted by non-autistic people, and researchers have described autism as something bad that should be fixed. Now, this is a problem for people like me and for the autistic community in general, especially for people who are self-identified or considering whether they might be autistic or have ADHD, because it influences society and the mental health of autistic people. Describing autism in this way has negative effects on how society views and treats autistic people, and may even negatively affect how autistic people view themselves. The paper contains a table suggesting alternatives to patronising and pathologized language. For instance, instead of burden of or suffering from autism, to use unemotional terms such as impact or effect. Autism symptoms becomes instead a reference to specific autistic characteristics or traits. ABA therapy that is very so often at the expense of the mental health and well-being of the autistic person could instead prioritise the well-being of the autistic person and include embracing their autistic identity rather than suppressing it, usually done for the benefit of neurotypical people around them. They also suggest identity-first language such as on the autism spectrum, and therefore autistic person rather than person-first language, which separates people from their disabling characteristics when it's used medically, such as person with spinal cord injuries or person with autism. Oh, what's this? Oh, don't worry about that. That's just my autism. I carry it around with me sometimes. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Before you think I've come over all woke, hold your keyboards and don't scroll. You first need to hear about the DAN protocol.
I'll give you a call for a protocol test as soon as it's hot.
There once was a psychologist called Bernard Rimland who earned his PhD from Penn State in 1953. But it wasn't until his son was diagnosed as autistic when he was just 2 years old that Bernard began his, let's say, rather controversial career. Now, back in the 1950s, the prevailing theory of autism was that it was caused by refrigerator mothers. Not my words. That is to say, mothers who are cold and distant from their children.
Oh, I know how awful and cold and distant and preoccupied and self-involved I must seem.
Bernard didn't think that this was a good explanation. It wasn't. And so he started looking for alternative explanations for why his son was autistic, the cause and treatment for him. In 1964, Bernard published a book called Infantile Autism, the Syndrome and its Implications for a Neural Theory of Behaviour. And he argued that autism was a result of biochemical defects triggered by environmental assaults. Bernard argued that autism could, quote, at least be treated or at least ameliorated with biomedical and behavioural therapies. According to his obituary in the LA Times, Rimland was among the first to conclude that the United States was undergoing an epidemic of autism, one that increased the incidence of the disorder from a rare 1 case in several thousand births to the current government-accepted rate of 1 in every 175 children. This is from 2006. Rimland also created the Autism Research Institute, ARI, which he used to promote now very debunked medical theories of autism. For example, Rimland concluded that in this increase, and more than 100,000 parents of autistic children, creating 200 local chapters across the United States. Rimland also created the Autism Society of America, a charity predecessor to Autism Speaks, who themselves took much from Rimland's controversial views, including his focus on finding a cure for autism and supporting research into its causes, including debunked links to vaccinations. From April 2013 to 2015, Autism Speaks website stated that, quote, it remains possible that may trigger the onset of autism symptoms in a child with an underlying medical or genetic condition. Just like a dog with a bone that just won't let it go, Autism Speaks continued to state their scientific priorities that Autism Speaks is funding studies on the underlying biology of autism, including studies to better understand medical and genetic conditions that are associated with autism that could potentially be linked to adverse responses to. Rimland also supported the much debunked, something that the FDA and the American Academy of Pediatrics refute. I consider Dr. Rimland the grand godfather of the moment for understanding of the biological treatment of autism, says Dr. Jacqueline McCandless in her book, Children with Starving Brains, A Medical Treatment Guide for Autism Spectrum Disorder. Needless to say, these books are not in the description link below this video. Rimland died in 2006, with much of his research discredited. But yet there is this overwhelming drive by people associated with Autism Speaks, perhaps the parents struggling with their autistic children, perhaps misguided supporting organisations like the police and fire departments, covering their vehicles with puzzle pieces, like we looked at in a previous video, to eradicate autism and to get autistic children to fight against their very nature through controversial ABA therapies. Now that we've delved into Rimland's background and the impact of his views on autism, let's explore one of his most controversial legacies, the DAN Protocol. So named as Defeat Autism Now, with the similar pseudo-religious overtones, as though autism is a symptom of demonic possession.
I am autism. I'm visible in your children.
It was developed and marketed through his Autism Research Institute as a comprehensive treatment plan for autism. Some of these interventions include gluten-rich diets and high doses of vitamin supplements and other unproven methods. Despite Rimland's fervent promotion, the DAN protocol lacked robust scientific evidence to support its efficacy. Keto diets can help treat epilepsy, but dietary interventions like high-dose vitamin treatments have not shown consistent reproducible benefits for autistic individuals. Despite the widespread criticism from the scientific and medical community, the DAN protocol continued to gain a significant following among desperate parents who are seeking solutions for their autistic children. This popularity was bolstered by testimonials and anecdotal reports rather than actual, peer-reviewed scientific research. It goes to show that often we believe something because we want it to be true, in spite of evidence to the contrary. While Rimland's intentions might have been to help, the methods he promoted have been largely discredited and can be harmful. His legacy lives on in organisations and cultures that seek to pathologise every single aspect of the autistic experience. I love my son, and it would be a considerable jump for someone to tell me that there's something innately wrong with him, that he was born wrong. He's not autistic, as far as I know, but if the traits of children, and the focus is always on children for some reason, are pathologised, othered, and spoken about with no regard to how this might be heard, or the effects on their mental health, then it's not such a big step towards negative mental health outcomes, is it? When I came to the realisation that I am autistic, I might have been dissuaded from this fact by society, by gatekeeping comments like the one at the start of this video, or by the older scientific literature that describes autistic traits, my autistic traits, as being deficient in some way. It's not just autistic YouTubers and content creators that need to push back against this culture. It's crucial for all of us to challenge ableist narratives and support approaches that emphasise acceptance, inclusion, and for those of us in the community with higher support needs, evidence-based care delivered by highly trained and caring healthcare workers. That's why on this channel I support people choosing to self-identify or self-diagnose their autism identification. Julian says, if you'd like to see the whole video, please head on over to the Autistic AF Patreon page. The link is in the description.